chest, massaging his heart.
At some point, I remember one of the doctors looked up and said, does anyone else have any suggestions, basically, for how to save him? And everyone said no, and they sort of disconnected he died. People were looking down, and then they were looking at each other, and someone went to go get a flag, an American flag, to drape over his body. And I continued photographing, and there was a moment where the whole room was silent, and people stood around his body, draped with a flag, and said a prayer. That, to me, is one of the most powerful images that came out of this whole series.
There's this old idea in photography called the decisive moment, that the world is filled with these far-off realities, but every so often a photograph can capture a moment that, boom, takes you there. This is one of those photos. In the picture, you see all these men and women standing in kind of a loose semicircle. Some of them still have their blue surgical gloves on. They look totally spent. They're all looking in different directions. And they all look like they're not even there. Like they're totally lost in their own thoughts.
Their attention is clearly inwards.
Yeah.
I'm sure all those troops were like, God, that could have been me. Why couldn't we save him? What are we doing here in Afghanistan? Is this war worth it? And to read the expressions on their faces, like it's even, you can be at war as a journalist, but never actually get to the heart of the war because we don't have access or people don't open up. And I felt like I really had reached like the crux of the war.
Interesting.
It was war.
You'd seen an essence of something.
Yeah.
But then came a problem. Any photos that she had taken that included that soldier's face, or any other identifying marks like tattoos, and he did have tattoos, according to the rules of her embed, she couldn't use those photos without the soldier's permission.
Right.
And you never got to speak to him.
No.
So was it days later, weeks later, months later, where you began to ask yourself, can I eat?
No,
Who do I talk to?
it was minutes later.
Minutes later.
It's the military does not let a journalist cover something like this without coming directly to that person. And so, literally, like, I followed the young man's body out to the morgue, and they had to walk him outside. And I remember the moon was so bright that night, and I was shooting with the moonlight as he was being carried outside. And then I went back to the tent where I was staying, and within minutes, the military PAO, the Marines, public affairs officers came and said, you can't send those images out without permission from the next of kin.
That's the rule. If a soldier is unconscious and then dies before giving permission,
I have to then go to the next of kin. And I said, of course, I understand. I'm not doing anything with those photos in that moment. I signed this piece of paper. When I give my word, I keep that word, But then the other side of me was like, fuck, in Vietnam, no one was signing pieces of paper. And in Vietnam, no one had to go to the next of kin before they published anything. And that's why the American public, I think, rose up against the war in Vietnam, because they saw the most graphic, devastating images that were uncensored.
so then what do you do in that circumstance? I mean, I imagine you go to the next of kin, right?
Well, you're not allowed as a journalist to reach out to the next of kin. They asked me, are you interested in being contacted by the next of kin if they're willing to speak to you?
Oh, so you can't even actually
No.
call.
No, they will not give you the information.
Oh.
But I said, of